You know, every single thing we use, from the phone in our hand to the t-shirt on our back, it has a story. And I don't just mean a story about materials and factories, I mean a human story, one that involves workers and communities and entire societies. So today, let's dive into that hidden story and unpack a really powerful tool that's designed to bring it all to light. When we talk about sustainability, we've gotten pretty good at measuring some things, right? But there's this huge piece of the puzzle that we almost always miss. We're just not measuring the full true impact of the things we make, buy, and use every day. Just think about it for a second. What's the complete A to Z story of the device you might be watching this on right now? Or, the coffee that got you going this morning? We know the price. We might even know its carbon footprint. But beyond that, what do we really know about its journey through human hands? And here's where it gets really interesting. We are meticulous about tracking the economic side, like the price. And we've made these huge leaps in tracking the environmental side, like the carbon footprint. But that third pillar of sustainability, the social one, the one about actual human impact and the conditions people work in, that has pretty much been a total black box. So, how do we crack open that black box? Well, that's where this methodology called Social Life Cycle Assessment, or SLCA for short, comes into play. The best way to think of it is kind of like a social nutrition label for our products. It's designed to tell us that exact part of the story we've been missing. And the most important word in the official definition here is technique. See, SCLC isn't about vague feelings or just stories. It is a systematic, structured method for gathering real data on social impacts, from the second raw materials are pulled from the ground, all the way to when a product is eventually thrown away. And this is not just some academic exercise to collect data for data's sake. The whole point, the ultimate goal, as this quote says, is action. It's about using this knowledge to actually drive positive change and, hopefully, improve the lives of every single person connected to a product's journey. So how does it actually work? Well, it follows this really clear four-step process. It actually mirrors its more famous cousin, the environmental LCA. You start by defining your goal and scope. Then you go out and collect all the data. After that, you assess the potential impacts. And finally, you interpret what it all means. It's a way to bring structure to a really, really complex topic. But when we say social impact, who are we even talking about? SCLA really broadens the lens to focus on 5 key groups. It looks at the direct impacts on workers and consumers, which makes sense, but it also goes bigger, looking at the effects on the local community where a factory might be, on society as a whole, and on all the other actors along the entire value chain. Now, this whole idea has actually been floating around since the 90s, but for the longest time, it was a pretty niche concept. Then, a couple of key things happened that caused the field to just explode. Let's take a look at the timeline. The real game changer was 2009. That's when the United Nations Environment Program released the first official guidelines that basically gave researchers a map. Then, in 2013, they released these detailed methodological sheets, which was like handing everyone a full toolkit. And that's when the research just took off. And when I say it took off, I really mean it. Get this. 2/3 of all the research ever published on SLCA up to 2018 was crammed into just the last 4 years of that period. That's not just growth. That's an absolute explosion of interest. And this chart just shows that surge perfectly. Before those UN guidelines, we were seeing maybe 2 papers a year? Then it jumped to 8. But after 2015, it skyrocketed to an average of over 30 papers every single year. The field literally went from a quiet little stream to a roaring river of research. So, with all this new research flooding in, what have we actually learned? Let's take a quick global snapshot of the field as it stands. First off, where is all this work happening? Well, it's definitely a global effort, but it is clearly being led by researchers in Europe. They account for almost 60% of all the publications. This is probably because of the strong institutional support for this kind of sustainability research in the EU. And what are they all studying? Well, the research shows a very clear focus on the worker stakeholder group. Things like fair wages, working hours, health and safety. Those are by far the most studied topics. And that might be because those impacts are a bit more direct and easier to measure than, say, the broader impact on an entire local community, which is a lot trickier to quantify. These diagrams really tell the story visually. Think of it as a before and after. On the left, before the UN guidelines, SLCA was just a small emerging idea.
But look at the picture on the right after the guidelines. It became what researchers call a motor theme. Basically, it went from a niche topic to a central, powerful engine that is now driving the entire field of sustainability science forward.
And we're not just talking about theory here. SLCA is being used in the real world across a huge range of industries. We're talking about the food we eat, the electronics we use, the cars we drive, the clothes we wear. This tool is being put to work to uncover those hidden social stories everywhere. But despite this incredible growth, the field is still pretty young. You could almost think of it like the Wild West, you know? Researchers are still busy mapping out the terrain and trying to establish some common rules of the road. And that brings us to some of the major hurdles they're still facing. I mean, how do you create a standard way to measure something as complex as community well-being? How do you get good, reliable data from these massive, tangled global supply chains? These are the fundamental questions that everyone is still wrestling with. And the field is already evolving. The next frontier seems to be this shift in focus from the product to the producer. It's a brand new concept called Social Organizational Lifecycle Assessment, or SOLCA. And the goal here is to go beyond just assessing one single t-shirt or one phone, and instead to try and assess the total social impact of an entire company. Which, of course, brings us right back to where we started. The whole point of all this research is to make the invisible visible, to give every product that transparent social story. So the final question is really for you. If you had that social nutrition label on everything you bought, would it actually change your choices? What would you do with that power?